If not, all those in favor of approving it, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Report on recent city council actions. Tom?
All right, just had the one item at the meeting last month, but that was the final plat for the Highlands Phase 1. That went to the city council, and they did approve the final plat, as it were, and it's going to be a little while before that one actually gets recorded. They've elected to build a lot of the infrastructure before actually recording the plat, but anyway, yep.
Any questions for Tom? Okay, thank you. We have 3 public hearings this evening. The first one is a map amendment to rezone 21 Steependale Court from R1 suburb to C1 neighborhood commercial district. At this time, we'll open the public hearing. Tom?
All right. So this is this property is located at the corner of Highway 72 and Stevendale Court. You don't have deja vu. We did talk about this one at a meeting a couple of months ago. The Planning and Zoning Commission reviewed it and ended up recommending approval to the City Council. The City Council did not approve it, and so the applicant has turned in the application again, and I'll get to what's new with it this time. But it's the same property, same building, and the same general idea. The request is zone it to the C1 neighborhood commercial district. Said the property has got it's on Highway 72. The kind of notice on the zoning map, the properties along Highway 72 are all zoned commercial, but it is on the Stevendale Court, which is a cul-de-sac with several single-family houses on it. So this is the street view. This is looking kind of toward the west. I wanted to show in the foreground where there is a commercial building on that same Stevendale Street, but then the request is to use this, plan is to use this house as for a commercial business. So what's new? As I said, we talked about this once. Some issues came up, were brought up by the neighborhood at the Planning and Zoning meeting, actually, and some things were brought up at the City Council meeting as well. And so the applicant has tried to address the issues that came up. So number one, the applicant has the property to the west under contract. I'll go back to the area map. This property here is already zoned C1 neighborhood commercial, and so they have that one under contract and plan to close on it this month. And that property would give this property access to Highway 72. The applicant went out and spoke to MoDOT to see if it is possible indeed to have a driveway on Highway 72. Found out that it is not possible for them to be granted access. And so with this other property that already has a driveway access to Highway 72, they would gain access to 72. The applicant also has prepared a site plan that demonstrates their ability to provide parking for the proposed use. And the applicant has gone and spoken to many of the neighbors in the area and believes that now there's, I don't know, if no opposition, but at least less opposition than there was the first time around. Applicant submitted this site plan, although is not required for this type of rezoning. Site plan is not actually required, but it did prepare a site plan that basically shows that it would be possible to have basically use up the front yard for some parking, and then could have a driveway sneak along the south side of the house and have an exit onto Highway 72 through that other property. So just to summarize, the comprehensive plan does designate this property and the properties along Highway 72 as being appropriate for neighborhood commercial uses. It is adjacent to commercial zoning and uses. It is also has the frontage on Highway 72, which is a major arterial road. And now that the applicant has demonstrated that the property should have adequate space for the required parking. Do you have any question? Well, I'll go ahead and read the alternatives. I'm still getting used to how we're doing things. But as you go through this, you can find that the request meets the criteria for approval, and so recommend approval. You can find that it meets the criteria for approval and recommend approval with the condition that the zoning not become effective until the applicant has actually purchased that adjacent property, if you feel that that's an important part of this puzzle, and or combines that either combines that property combines the two properties together or records some sort of access easement to grant access across that other lot. Or if you find that it's not appropriate, you can recommend that the city council not approve it. If we need more time, table it to the next meeting. Now, do you have any questions for me before you open it up to the?
Any questions for Tom?
Tom, so property 400, the one that is in process of being purchased, is the plan for that to be raised and then that be a additional parking lot?
Not at this time, no. It's
Okay. And the actual restaurant per se will be in the house that is existing on 21?
That is the plan.
So 400 gives them access to 72, so they can come in off of Stevendale, but go off onto Highway 72 is the,
Yes.
kind of what the site plan indicates.
Yes.
And we can make that contingent on a motion based off what you said for the, based off of what we can make the recommendation that's contingent on the closing
Yeah,
of that
so
property.
it's not often that we approve rezonings with conditions of approval. It was more common in the past. So if we were to approve it with conditions, it's good to have conditions. It's something that can be achieved before they move on with something that is once and done. What you couldn't do would be like, say, rezone it and say, sure, you can have C1 zoning, but you can't have a fast food restaurant, for example, something like that. Say if it, because what you're doing is you're effectively you're creating a new zoning district. It's C1, except for on this particular lot, you can't do something that's allowed on that property. But with a condition, that's something that could be set and done. That'd be the why the ordinance be worded to be, if it won't become effective until this thing has happened. That's something I think you can do.
So the site plan that shows the access to 72, is that an entrance exit, both, or is that just an exit and then entrance off of Stevendale?
Yeah, the way that one's drawn, it's drawn more of an exit. It could be flipped to go the other way. It's I don't think.
Okay, so entrance on Stevendale, exit onto 72.
That's what that site plan shows, yeah.
But nothing that we would do would actually make that binding at this point, correct?
Right, and again, that's kind of part of, if you were to do something like that, you'd be essentially creating a special zoning district just for this property. So that's kind of why we don't get site plans with these things, because with the zoning district, you can do anything that's allowed in the zoning district. The applicant could tear the house down and build a new restaurant or something like that.
Nathan, what was the objection with the city council originally when we approved this?
There may have been other members that had brought up other concerns, primarily parking and the impact on Stevendale Court, since there'd be so much traffic going in off of that area, likely how that dead-end road would be utilized, a lot of street parking potentially to occur because of the limited lot size of that. It has Highway 72 frontage, but the house actually faces Stevendale Court, so that's where everyone's going to be going in off of. So that was probably the primary concern, was the impact on a fairly small neighborhood with no outlet. So everyone's going to be going down trying to get turned around and come back. Whereas having an entrance and an exit, to me that mitigates some of the concerns I was having at least.
I should probably also add that when it was before the Planning and Zoning Commission, you had one neighbor who was voiced some opposition. When it got to the city council, several neighbors had signed a petition. It wasn't quite enough to be a protest petition that would have required a 2/3 majority vote of the city council, but it was still a good chunk of the people who lived in that area on Stevendale Court signed that petition.
And then from what you said earlier, we can approve this on the condition that the applicant does purchase the adjacent property, correct?
I believe you can.
Tom, that property he's trying to purchase, that will stay the same zoning it is now?
Yes.
Because it's commercial, correct?
Yeah, it's already commercial.
It's already commercial.
Do we leave them two separate lots still, I guess, is how that would still be set up, or do you combine them into a single lot?
I mean, it's an option.
Okay.
It sort of depends on what the applicant wants to do. If the plan changed to become tear the building down and do a parking lot, it makes a lot more sense just to combine it together. If the plan was to just use that as a driveway exit and keep the house as a rental house, then it makes a lot more sense just to keep them as separate lots and use an easement.
Okay.
Tom, does he have to make any adjustments to the two entrances? I see on Steepledale, it looks like it's a fairly wide entrance. Does he have to make adjustments to meet that width?
Yes,
shown in the drawing?
that site plan anticipates making changes to that driveway. I've already shown that to the Public Works Department, and they're okay with that width, that design.
Okay.
And so the access easement will be on the other piece of property that's being obtained, correct?
Yes.
That is the change.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Tom. We now have the meeting is open, and anyone wishing to discuss this issue with us, please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes to discuss it. Please give your name to and address to Sandy, and we'll go from there. Seeing no one, Tom, you have anything else?
I didn't have anything to add, but I will say that if you did have any questions specific for the applicant, he is in attendance tonight, so, anyway,
Okay, well, he doesn't want to come forward though unless we have a question.
yeah.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. Anybody have a question for her? Okay. At this time, we'll close the public hearing. And anybody else have any questions or comments? I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that it meets the criteria and recommend approval with the condition that zoning does not become effective until the applicant has purchased the adjacent property, combines or records access easement.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Whew. We have a first and a second. Any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Turbin,
Yes.
Kreider,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Shields,
Yes.
Martin.
Do you need,
Sorry.
you need to sit up higher.
Raise that chair up.
Motion passes. Thank you. Our second public hearing, vacation of the remainder of an alley north of 18th Street between Elm Street and Oak Street. We'll open the public hearing. Tom?
Right. Just a moment to get all set up. All right. Yes, this is another one of the city-initiated vacations. And so this one is the alleyway north of 18th Street. It's kind of the block bounded by 18th, Elm Street, Oak Street, and Bishop Highway 63. The north portion of this block, the alleyway, has already been vacated, and that the north half of the block was redeveloped as a bank. And so this would be just to vacate the rest of it. This is a street view looking at it, so there used to be an alleyway there. However, nobody's accessing it now. Now it's grown up and whatnot. There are some overhead utility lines that go back to the back there, so if this were to be vacated, it would be replaced with a utility easement. We did send letters out to everybody who is adjacent to this before we went forward with this, just make sure nobody's gonna have any problem. Didn't hear from anybody, and then I'll sent letters out again for the official public hearing. This is a survey from the plat, just showing when it was platted. It's a 15-foot alleyway. Just all the blocks in that area had alleys. So just to summarize, there are utilities located in this alley, so an easement will be retained. The alley is no longer needed for access. We didn't receive any objection from utility providers, and they wouldn't, because we're gonna replace with an easement. And these preemptive vacations are intended to save time and effort for the city and the property owners in the area. So you have some alternatives. You can recommend that the city council approve it, or you can find that it's not appropriate and still recommend that they don't, or if you need more time, table it to the next meeting.
Any questions for Tom?
Have the property owners been contacted as to the closing of this alley?
Yes, yes. We sent a letter before did anything, just to have them contact me, and then we've sent letters out with the, before this meeting to let them know this meeting was going to happen.
And none of them were concerned about it?
I didn't hear from any of them. So I don't know if they were concerned or not, but I did not hear from anybody.
Any other questions for Tom? Okay. Again, the public hearing is open. Anyone wishing to come speak to this issue, please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes. Please give your name and address to Sandy. Seeing nobody, Tom, you got anything else?
Nope, I'm here if you have any questions.
We'll close the public hearing on this issue. I'll entertain a motion.
Move that we recommend the city council approve the request.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Shields,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Jordan,
Yes.
Kreider,
Yes.
Turbin,
Yes.
Motion passes. Third public hearing, text amendment to Chapter 42, Planning and Zoning of the City of Rolla Ordinance, Section 42-344 through 42-346 pertaining to signage.
All right, so a few months ago, did you open the public hearing? I can't remember.
Open the public hearing.
Huh?
Open the public hearing.
Oh, I'm sorry. And we'll open the public hearing on this issue.
All right, thank you.
Sorry about that.
All right, so a few months ago, we met to kind of discuss some ideas for the signage issue. Basically, the issues come up with the kind of the temporary signs, in particular related to elections, but it could be for other things. But on properties that are not developed, what to do with these big lots where people put a whole bunch of signs, basically. And so the strict reading of the current ordinance kind of said that some of that stuff that people were doing coming up to election time wasn't actually allowed. And so we were asked to bring back something to deal with that. And so met with you all and kind of got some input. It was a little bit both directions, and so we'll come back with something. So please feel free to make recommendations if you feel that anything should be changed. So I'll just put it that way. So currently in residential districts, basically this is what it says now. You can have a sign that can be up to 6 feet tall, and it can be on the building or they can be freestanding. And if there are, like for off premises, like say if you had a carpet cleaning service come out, you can do that for up to 14 days per quarter. And whatever you do, it can be up to 32 square feet. That's what it currently allows. And so what's proposed for the the changes in this part of the text, what's proposed is to change the maximum sign height just in general and bring it up to 7 feet. That brings it more in line with the building code, because 7 feet's when you need building permits for things like fences and whatnot. So I thought might as well, it said 6 feet before, might as well just bring it up to 7, just so it's consistent. Then also adding a new category for signage. So this is for undeveloped, residentially zoned properties larger than 5 acres. So on those types of properties, what would be allowed would be freestanding signs, and that includes like the temporary signage, and it could be off-premises signage for up to 14 days per quarter, which is the same thing that's allowed on a commercial lot and any other residential lot. And as far as the number and area, so what would be allowed is you can have as many signs as you want, but up to 32 square feet per 40 feet of frontage. So what was kind of picked is basically if the idea is if since it's an undeveloped piece of property, if they were to subdivide it into lots, 40 feet's, you could maybe go less depending on some zoning districts, but sometimes they're more. So that number is definitely up for debate as far as that goes. But the idea is allow them to have what they could have if the property were developed is kind of what was being kind of thrown out there. And in addition, instead of making you space those signs out, we're saying, hey, instead of doing that, you could just group them all in one location, so they'd be kind of in the intersection instead of just spaced out. And then for commercial districts, right now the temporary signs is kind of listed in a different section. Basically, it says it's on a vacant piece of property. You're allowed as many signs as you want, but up to 96 square feet in total. And again, the problem was on larger vacant properties. 96 square feet doesn't actually quite add up to a whole lot. And so the proposal would be to create a new sign category, again for this undeveloped, non-residentially zoned properties, and that would allow for the freestanding signs, which is the temporary signage, and it could be temporary or one that's just there forever. And for off-premises, 14 days per quarter, which is they'll at all match. And as far as the number and area, proposing it to be the same as the residential, so it's basically undeveloped commercial, undeveloped residential, doesn't matter, up to the 32 square feet per 40 feet of frontage. And again, they could be grouped at an intersection, and again, the maximum height at 7 feet. So there's kind of two places that really all this kind of boils down to. There's a handful of places in towns, put it that way. But I wanted to show some examples at the two main places where this stuff comes up. So kind of on Forum and 18th Street, there's several people like to locate the temporary signage at that intersection. And so this picture happened to be taken during some election a couple of years ago. And so what's proposed now would allow for this property to have up to 768 square feet of signage on one of these properties. This is a couple of different lots, but the main one there at the corner, 768 square feet total. And again, they could be bunched together, and that would allow for up to 24 plywood sized, like a 8 foot by, but anyway, that normal size plywood. And then the other location there at 6th and Main and Rolla, there's a block there that's undeveloped, and a lot of election signs and temporary signage ends up there. That one would be allowed for a total of 608 square feet of signage, which would be 19 signs of that maximum size. So just to summarize, the proposed text amendment is needed to make some clarification to city ordinances because there's a bit of confusion as to what to do with these undeveloped pieces of property. And it should create a little bit more fairness in what to do with these undeveloped pieces of property, because some of them are pretty large. And what do you do with signage for those? You have some alternatives as you go through all this. You can find that this is needed, and so recommend the city council approve it as it's presented, or with whatever modifications you come up with. Or you can find that this is not needed, and so recommend that they don't take any action, or if you need more time, table it to the next meeting. Do you have any questions for me?
Any questions for Tom?
Yep.
Number one, does what we're looking at here alleviate the problems in the past that were experienced when people were griping about Fred's sign is bigger than Joe's?
Depends on what you mean by the problem. If the problem is there's too many signs, it allows for a lot of signs.
Yeah.
If the problem is we don't want people complaining about the number of signs, this should take care of it, because this appears to be more than what people have historically put out there.
Yeah.
So
But I thought last time there was a complaint about the size of an individual sign. Does this cover that?
So I think, let me look at the text. We'll look at it.
It addresses the height.
Yeah, definitely the
Of an
height.
individual sign. It has
Right.
to be less than 7 feet,
Yeah, definitely the height.
And
7 feet.
But wasn't that the complaint on the, originally, that Fred's sign was too big?
Not exactly. The complaint was at the, especially in the
That was
residentially
the
zoned ones,
political
was
signs.
you're only allowed to have 32 square feet total. And so they had, 5 32 square foot signs out there. And so there was just too many signs out there. Or, yeah.
And so that brings me to my question, Tom. Does this specify that that is per candidate, or is that total for the piece of property?
The maximum
I mean,
square
is
footage
that
should be
all-
total for the whole piece of property.
Okay,
So you could have 10 signs for the same candidate. We don't
Okay.
care what the signs say.
but if you have multiple candidates
Mhm.
and you exceed the allowed footage, how do you determine whose sign goes?
Great point.
We don't. We would tell the property owner they need to take care of it.
Okay, so this is on, so the property owner will be in violation of this ordinance?
Yes,
Not the individual candidates?
right.
Because assuming that as the property owner, he has given permission to the people displaying the signs?
Yes.
Okay.
So how did we come up with the total signage? Because like, go back to your picture of, yeah, right there. Now granted, in that picture, there's only 2 signs, but there is a lot of property there. How do we, what's the determining factor as to how
So,
many?
yeah, for this-
This says there could be 19 plywood signs there. How'd we come up with that?
Yeah, so you can have 32 square feet per 40 feet of street frontage. So what I did was on that property, I just measured the road frontage, divided by 40, then multiplied by 32. And then then turn around and divide it by 32 to end up with the number of plywood signs, but
And that's because there's actually frontage on that piece of property? Is it 2 sides or 3?
that one's got frontage on 4 sides. It's the
4
entire,
sides.
it's the entire block.
So you've got 4 sides of linear feet there.
Yeah.
Whereas like the Forum property, I think only actually has 2.
Yeah, well, I'm just a little bit up the roundabout, but really just that one I just did on one of the lots. So because that forum property is divided into a couple of lots, so that one I just did
okay.
on the biggest lot. They could actually have more signs, but they should be on their lots or whatever. But
On down,
yeah,
what, east, north, whatever.
So you said in part the thing to consider is how it's calculated. Because you said it's 40 linear feet
go back
of
to-
frontage. But if that number changes, that obviously would increase or decrease how
Yeah.
much should go.
Yeah.
'Cause you said that's kind of the arguable point, is how much should be,
Yeah.
based on, how much is that calculated off of?
yeah. The 32 square foot is pretty consistent across the board, and that's the size of a regular sheet of plywood. So that's kind of
Right.
a normal size. But the number of the 40 feet of frontage, that's the one that's a bit debatable. That
Right.
number could change if you think 100 feet makes a lot more sense, or if you think 20 feet makes more sense. It's really just whatever. That's the kind of the number that's up for debate.
Any other questions for Tom?
Well, it's more just processing through. So it seems like a lot of signage that would be allowed. I think it's kind of, because I was curious, because I was hoping you'd come with like the measurements of how much is this going to allow. You said Foreman allows 24 signs, and on this property, was it the old Paul's property or whatever that piece of property used to be? It was
Yeah, it was a lumberyard.
19 signs.
Yeah.
So I was somewhat curious, instead of 40, like, do we want that much allowed? Like, we don't want to be crazy restrictive, but 19 signs is just going to be like that whole area is just all signage.
Yeah.
Right.
On the forum drive, the code used to say you could have just one, and on the other one, the one that's downtown, the old code would have allowed for 3. So that's the change.
And
Should
what
be-
you're saying by the grouping, though, does one particular sign have to stay within that 40 foot, or if that property's allowed 19, can you pack all of those
Yeah.
inside of 120
Yeah, that's the idea, is
feet?
we don't care where the 40 feet is, where is that 40 feet? So
Gotcha,
just put them all in
gotcha.
whatever corner you want.
All right.
And that the tendency is going to be, of course, on the street
Yeah.
that they need the most visibility.
Right.
Sure.
So,
But you could have more signs on the roundabout down there at the end of 18th than you could on that property that's got street frontage on all four sides?
It's a bigger property.
Yeah, that property has more frontage. It's long.
How can there be more frontage on that roundabout if you're just talking the north side of it and the east side?
Because they own all the way down
he
to
keeps going
basically
up.
the end of Forum. They
Yeah.
own that whole farm running up that
Oh.
acreage. So all that gets put into the calculation
Calculation.
of what can go at that roundabout, because that's a part of that one property. Because they own such a large piece of lot and that farmland there, that's a part of the calculation of how much they can put in a cluster area.
So you're talking about signs running all the way down the street?
they could.
Or they could,
Theoretically.
On four,
Theoretically.
or they could put just on the roundabout, but the fact that they own all of that is what the calculation's based off of.
Okay, that makes a lot of difference, because
Yeah.
normally you just see the signs on the roundabout, and I'm wondering, well, how can you put more signs on that area than you could on that area that's got streets?
Frontage on four sides.
Yeah,
I'm somewhat interested, and this is more just what feels right, so I'm very happy to be shot down with this, is you talked about, is 100 right? I almost feel like cutting the signage in half, so of doing like 80 feet or something like that, because then you would, instead of 24 4-foot by 8-foot pieces of signage, you would be able to put like 12 in that, in 24 would just be, you could line almost that whole property of just one huge sign after the next running up and down that area. Not that they have, but I don't know if that's a proper one. It feels a little bit arbitrary, but based off the numbers you're giving, I would be interested in maybe making it based off of 80 linear feet. So it basically, I would assume, would become half then of the signage that you just gave us.
Would the caveat there be if, let's say it's one single small lot that has less than 80 foot of frontage and someone wants a sign, you would almost have to make something say that that person would be entitled to a sign as well. Maybe they've only got 60 foot of road frontage.
And I don't think this would apply to them at all, because this is only for, at least in this proposed one, it's only for properties of 5 acres or larger.
Oh, then that's, yeah.
So I think this is its own exclusive section.
Perfect.
Well, to be fair, on the residential one, it's 5 acres larger. On the commercial one, it's just undeveloped residential.
Well, I was gonna have that
undeveloped
question.
commercial. So-
Do we
so-
want just any commercial lot can put, it's just based off of, I guess, frontage, but there's no acreage
Right.
expectation there.
Right. So, that couldn't happen where you'd have a lot that's less than 80 feet. So what do you do? It'd be easy to add or a percentage thereof or something like that so that you have a
Or
a
just limit
percentage
it a
of
maximum
that,
of 32 feet.
or-
if it
or a minimum
falls
of
below that
32
and-
square, yeah.
Yeah.
something like that.
Does anyone have that was my thought, was to reduce it a little bit, is go more like 80 linear feet. You get 32 square foot of signage, at least on the, again, my mind very much goes to these big farm properties, because that's where this conversation started at. That would allow the forum property to have like 12-foot, 4-foot by 8-foot signs, and the one in the downtown area to have 9 or something like that. Yeah, that one.
okay, I'm curious. The only time that we've run into this problem is during an election period, right? And is it necessary to, if that's the only time that it occurs for like roughly a 6-week period, how much restriction do we need to put on this? First of all, take the forum over there. There has never been a time that I can recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there's ever been any signs put on down the road. They're all on the curve there.
But there was a time where that
There's
was,
one still right,
They what?
there's one still out on down the street. Hasn't been picked up yet.
but what occurred is that they put the normal amount in one of the past political elections. They put their normal, like 5 or 6 political signs there, and that exceeded, and so it got reported, so they all had to be taken, so well, they didn't all have to be taken down, but the landowner said, everyone come get their signs and get them off, because I just got cited by the city, because someone reported for having too much signage there. That was where it began, because basically, if someone was allowing a political sign that they didn't agree with, they would kind of weaponize that and say, I want all these taken down, because they're only allowed to have so much. So all of them actually had to be removed off that roundabout, because they were only allowed to have one sign there, even though they own 20 acres there or something like that. Is that correct, Tom? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Correct.
So we're increasing the signage, am I correct?
To allow it on, in particular for the, residential, the larger lots. If they own a large amount of acreage, or in this case, have a lot of, frontage, then they can have more signage. Do we do that by motion, like if we want to make it the 80 linear feet, or do we want to recalculate any of that, or what's the proper way to handle that?
Yeah, you should include that in the motion.
Okay. What about the 14 day? I guess, is 14 days always been the number? I hadn't read that very recently, the signage, because really for political signage, that's a pretty short period of time. Not that that's exclusively what we're talking about, but
Yeah, I mean, the 14 days, I don't think the intent is to be talking about political signs as far as that goes. That's more of, if somebody wants to, advertise their business, say, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola's paying them to do something so that they can have a Coca-Cola sign for 14 days. That way it doesn't become a billboard, essentially.
But
if-
that doesn't include real estate signs, for sale signs for real estate, the 14 days?
Generally, no. I mean, so it's complicated in that when it comes to sign code, we're supposed to be able to enforce it without looking at the sign. They're supposed to have to do with just the size and where it's located. But then the courts have said that you can regulate off-premise signs. Well, how do you know if it's off-premise without reading the sign? And what exactly is off-premise? I mean, clearly, if you're advertising a business or something like that that's not occurring on the property, it's off-premise. Generally, ideas that's held by the owner of the property is not. And political afflictions would generally be an idea held by the owner of the property, because they wouldn't be allowing it to be there if they didn't agree with it, you wouldn't think, anyway.
But is the way we're wording this ordinance right now, how is there going to be a distinction between which signs can be up for 14 days and which not? Because it doesn't make any distinction in this.
it wouldn't.
So how do you determine, well, his sign has to go because it's the 15th day and mine doesn't?
Well, that's what I say. In that case, we do have to read and understand what the sign is saying. So if they're advertising a business that's not occurring on the property, then you can't do that.
Where does it say that in the ordinance?
Now, there's a definition for off-premise signage. But as far as, like I say, it's kind of hard to define. It's almost like, almost like pornography. You know it when you see it. But, yeah.
So to avoid future issues with the 14 days, because again, that could be potentially utilized also to cause issues, is going to cause issues if we extend that to like 21 days or to 30 days. Because that feels like, I mean, I've ran for, election in the past. Rarely is it only the last 2 weeks that people are getting signs up, as you're looking at, 3 weeks to a month out, people are starting to get their signs up. If it became a 30 days, does that wreak all sorts of havoc for other temporary signage, non-politically related?
No, I don't think it would be that big a deal to do that. It's per quarter also, so I mean, you end up with a good chunk of the year that somebody could have a sign out, but for whatever it would say. But
So it would say 30 days out of basically 90 days,
Yeah.
you could have a sign
So
up.
basically 1/3 of the year you could have signs up, whatever, but. Yeah. Again, we don't actually, we don't issue permits for these temporary signs, and so we don't know when they've been up on day one, and so generally what happens if it's been there for a while, then we start counting. And we notice it.
You've got something in here that says if they go, if they've got the 14 days and then you give notice to the landowner and he's got another 14 days to
Yeah.
take them down.
Yeah, basically,
Right
it's when-
there, you've
once we
got
notify you.
28 days.
Yeah.
So I don't see the issue.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Do we want anything that gives the maximum amount of size to a single sign? That kind of got brought up earlier, because it's, you're given a linear, you're given a square footage. It can't exceed 7 feet, but you can conceptually make one really big sign. Is there any sort of concern of something like that happening?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think so. I read through the text, and I don't think it's very clear to say that 32 square foot is the maximum size for a single sign. It
Yeah.
probably ought to be more clear. We like to be more clear than not clear. So if you're concerned about what it says now, I would probably recommend that be part of a motion.
So even if the property could have 9 signs, we could put the language that no single sign could exceed 32 square feet.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that was kind of the intent, and it sort of said that with kind of before, but it just looking at the way it's written, I think it could be more clear.
I mean, for
Well, wait a minute.
political signs, 32 square feet is about as big as they get. Is there any other businesses that's going to be like a major issue? I don't see signs much bigger than that.
Major issue, I wouldn't say. Now, if you're on a major road and say there's a lot of distance between the actual property line and the road, I could see a need for temporary signage to need to be bigger than that. But we also, remember, we have, for weird cases, you do have the Board of Adjustment who can issue a variance for, strange cases where you need more.
And that's exactly what
Larger
McBride
size.
just took to the group, correct?
Yeah, that was part of the reasoning is in their particular case, they were a big distance away, so that's kind of why they needed bigger signs.
And that went to Board of Adjustments?
Yes.
Okay,
But there are some circumstances where it could happen.
Okay.
am I reading this wrong? But under B, where it says number and sign area, if the total sign area of all signs does not exceed 32 square feet, there's no limit on the number of signs.
Yeah.
To me, that says there can only be 32 feet of signs. Am I reading that wrong?
Square feet.
Well, okay, square feet. Still, it's limiting the amount of signage.
For residentially zoned properties, I mean, it's under,
Yeah, it probably should be repeated in the commercial one.
yeah.
Something like that. Oh, above, I see. So the issue with that, the one you're pointing to, that's, we're creating a different category, and so that 32 square feet would apply to that other category, and so that's why I'm saying we probably ought to clarify for this category, so it's very clear. We don't want people to,
So basically, we want that same language in each category,
Yeah.
whether commercial or your large
Yeah.
lot residential ones as well.
that's why I say it was definitely the intent, but I can see how, as is proposed, it doesn't quite come out and say that.
So Tom, would it be better for those changes to be made and then bring it back to us for approval? Or are you suggesting that we put that in our motion with those amendments?
It could be done either way.
I think there's enough changes that having him bring it back would, to look at a clean,
Clean copy?
if you're comfortable with that.
Okay.
I would feel better about it.
Me too.
Any other questions for Tom?
So basically, the changes he's gonna make, because is that what, do we need to make a motion that that's what we're requesting? Do you wanna do the,
We have to close the public hearing
oh,
first.
sorry.
Any other questions? For
Any other questions for Tom? We can't close it till you guys quit.
Sorry.
Anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this issue, please come forward. Okay, no one coming forward. Tom, you got anything else? We'll close the public hearing at this time. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I'd entertain the motion. Or if you want to just have them change it, however you want to do it. And then bring it back to us.
You need a motion to table, he knows the changes.
Yeah, I make the motion that we table the request until the next meeting, and so that the additional changes that have been discussed can be inserted and we have another
Okay.
look at it.
We
Second.
need to make a motion on that or just table it?
Yeah. We need a motion.
Got a second?
Kevin.
Second?
So she made a motion to table. That way you guys can bring back next time what we discussed, but do we need to make a motion on the individual things that we discussed or not?
You don't have to. I've written down the things, so if what I so I can prepare something based on kind of what we discussed. What I don't know is how you all feel about those things we discussed, because you haven't actually, discussed those particular things. So if you were to table it as it is, I'll bring it back what I think you want, and we'll find out if that's what you want, or if you wanted to make a motion with those particular changes, and we'd find out if those are the actual changes y'all want.
All those in favor of tabling the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? We've tabled it. Okay, that's the end of the public hearings. No new business, no old business. Tom, you've got a presentation.
Maybe.
Tom or Dawn, one or the other.
Somebody's got one.
Well, one thing, we didn't table that to the next meeting or a date certain or something like that, so
Janice did say to the next meeting.
she did say that? Okay, good. All right. So I wanted to put together a little presentation about so we had a tornado on March 14th. I think you all knew that. So I wanted to put together something about kind of that event and the community developments part of that. So just to kind of begin, there was a tornado that went through Rolla. I think you knew that. It ended up being rated an EF2 tornado with a maximum radar detected wind speed of 120 miles per hour. At its maximum point, they figure that it was about 175 yards wide, and which is the same as 525 feet or 1/10 of a mile at the width, and that'd be again at the maximum width. And it had a 8.7 mile track, and that track went through areas of city of Rolla, obviously, and portions of Phelps County. This one tornado was part of a larger storm system that involved 117 total tornadoes across several states, and that particular storm system caused all sorts of things to happen, including, kind of ironically, at a city I used to work at, Stillwater, Oklahoma. It sparked a wildfire that ended up consuming more than 70 houses in the city limits of Rolla, so like what you see out west type wildfire. So we put together, based on damage assessments that were performed after the storm, put together some mapping to kind of show where the tornado went and what damages it caused. So this map I've got for you, this here would be Highway 63, and so the tornado entered Rolla from Phelps County on the west side of town and kind of tracked northeasterly. And so what you see on here, the buildings that are in red are major damaged. There's a purple category; those are ones that were just destroyed. And then there's orange, which is kind of heavy damage. And then there's major. Anyway, we'll get to the categories. But then the yellow is ones that are kind of affected or whatever. So still some damage. But so you notice one thing you notice right off the bat is there's the tornado area, and that's definitely where the majority of the damage has happened. But particularly on the south side of town, a lot of damage has occurred not in the path of the tornado. I think this was kind of in a draft of area coming into the tornado as it was forming, and it kind of caused right at where some of the worst of the storm happened. And so these more of like straight line winds as opposed to actual tornadic winds that caused that damage. And got a detail as of course the most visible area of damage there on Highway 63 at the Shoppers World area there at Landing Lane and whatnot. So then the tornado would have continued through town and crossed. This would be Highway 72, this line through here, and kept on going. And then here's Forum Drive. So there was another primary area there at kind of Green Acres Park, Highway 72 area, where there was a center of a lot of damage, and then another center of a lot of damage around Forum and 10th Street. And so, like I said, these maps kind of show some details of which houses how they were damaged and whatnot. And as I said, once you get to the northern part, the damage pretty well follows where the tornado actually went. I guess I'm not going to be able to go in the order I wanted to go in. So, what I was trying to show on this map, I'll try to do it with words, is this one here is where the tornado, that's the tornado path. And so what I'm trying to highlight here is, we had a tornado come through town. That's pretty bad. It went, right through the whole of the city. And but I wanted to kind of point out is we had a couple of things on our side as far as it being, it could have been a lot worse. That's what I'm trying to say is, number one, it was EF2 with a maximum wind speed of 120. When it comes to like buildings and whatnot, as they're designed, right? The building code has them requires them to be designed to a 90 mile an hour, 3-second, 90 mile an hour wind, which a direct hit by an F2 tornado still is going to do some damage. But as the wind speed goes up, the damage goes up exponentially because you're getting further and further away from what a building was designed to handle. Once something goes beyond what it's designed to handle, it sort of fails, spectacularly. And so if the wind speeds would have been a little higher, I think we would have seen a lot more damage. Tornado came through while the leaves weren't on the trees. Actually, most of the damage I think we saw through town was damage caused by trees falling onto buildings. If those trees would have had leaves on them, we would have had a lot more trees falling over. Same thing with the ground wasn't particularly wet beforehand. The ground was actually fairly dry before the storm. And also the track of the tornado. So I'm trying to show you with these blue areas, about half of the area where the tornado went through Rolla is undeveloped properties that are mostly just woods. So imagine if the tornado path would have been shifted even just a little bit further north, and that's kind of what I was trying to show here. This same tornado path just shifted a little bit further north. So a little bit further north, it would have gone through the downtown, would have been closer to the campus, would have caused some major impacts to the campus, and would have gone through a large area of town in the Schumann-Berwan type area, which is a large area of older housing that's in a vulnerable type population. So just a little bit of a shift of the same storm would have caused a lot more impact on the city. So, it's terrible that it happened, but there were several things that were on our side.
Not to mention that if it had been during the school day,
Yeah,
it
timing.
would have been a disaster.
Yeah. So what did it do? So just to kind of summarize, based on the damage assessments that were done after the storm, that basically crews went out and kind of did a preliminary look at what based on kind of what they could see. That's kind of part of it is only based on what they could see, and they categorized the damage. And basically what they found is there 20 buildings were obviously destroyed. Now, when I look at, I pulled on the left-hand side of the screen, you see kind of the definitions of what these are supposed to mean. I'm not sure if maybe some of them really weren't major category, but either way, would definitely, based on the definition destroyed, we had some buildings that were clearly, definitely, obviously destroyed. And then in the major damage category, so you kind of see what those are, and those are when buildings that will require an engineer to put back together, basically, if it can be put together. May still be enough damage to be destroyed, like had to be torn down, but it's not obvious at that point. Had about 60 buildings with that type of damage. And then they call it minor. I wouldn't, minor is a tough term because it's the damage in the minor category is still thousands of dollars worth of damage to a building, but that's what they call minor. And that would also be something that would, what they call minor damage would be something that would cause a building to not be habitable for the time being until it's repaired. So then the other category is affected. Affected sounds pretty nice, right? Well, affected, it's still a lot of damage. It can be your barn could have been destroyed, your roof may need to be replaced, things like that is still affected, but still habitable. You could still live in the house, but it's a lot of it can be cosmetic and replaced. Like maybe your siding blew off and was damaged. It still requires something to be fixed. And then who knows how many houses had some sort of other damage that isn't counted, that doesn't quite rise to that level. Like pretty much everybody had to clean up something, and a lot of people had tree damage that had to be fixed and whatnot. So many people in town were affected. In total, about 525 buildings in Rolla and Phelps County were damaged or affected in some way. We've already found, so some people have already gotten on getting the cleanup done and all that. So 2 of the buildings have already been demolished and removed. And we've already issued 117 electrical permits. So these are when there was damage to the electric system going into the house, like the weather head, the service line coming in. In order to have the electric hooked back up to a house, that has to be inspected. So 117 of those have already been fixed. And then 5 permits for repairs to houses and whatnot have already been issued. So when there's a storm, basically what the storm management groups, they kind of call it the disaster management cycle, and there's 4 time periods for disasters, and it kind of starts at the event, and at the event there's after the event there's the response, and typically the response is the people you think of, like the police and fire. When the tornado happened, the city planner wasn't going around and rescuing people or anything like that. So, but what the community development department did do is there was several members of the staff did coordinate with the emergency operations center that started the next day and continued for several days after the tornado. The emergency operations center is the headquarters of the response. The department conducted inspections for unsafe structures after the storm. There's stuff all over the place. Some of the buildings were not safe to enter, and so we went through and found which ones were obviously not safe to enter and posted those for either no or limited occupancy. The limited occupancy was basically, the idea is we're not sure, but we can do a deeper inspection to figure out if it's okay or not, but in general you should be careful. We prepared several handouts for people for these when we're posting these things, and for some other materials to as people are coming and getting permits, some scam awareness and things like that. We also took a lot of this disaster assessments and put it in a form to be able to get to our GIS mapping so we can make that nice map. So after the response phase, you enter the recovery phase. That's when things are getting back to normal. I'd say that's kind of where we are now. During that phase, the community development department is responsible for, there's going to be a lot of permitting inspections, and that's already kind of started, getting the buildings fixed that were damaged, basically, and inspecting and make sure they're put back together correctly. There's also going to be an element of code enforcement. there are some people who've gotten on and getting their property cleaned up. There are some people, I mean, I can attest that there are people, while it was raining after the storm, were outside cleaning up. Some people get on it immediately, and some people haven't gone on it quite yet. And so there will be an element of code enforcement to make sure that things get cleaned up and that unsafe buildings are, something is done with them at some point here. Then the mitigation. Mitigation is kind of what's done to prevent there from being problems when a disaster occurs. And so part of that is, again, permitting and inspections. That's what the community development and the building inspectors do, is we're inspecting buildings as they're built to make sure that they, number two, meet the building codes. One of the things that was, it appears to be obvious after the storm is there's a difference in how the storm affected buildings based on the age of the structure. Older buildings that were built in the county and were later became into the city or were built before there were building codes, those are the ones that suffered the major types of damage. Ones that were right nearby and were built that were newer appear to only have like maybe some shingles missing, things like that. So some of that is the luck of the draw, maybe. Some of that's, it could have been a tree or something else in the way that blocks some of the wind or something like that. You never know for sure. But on average, it sure appeared that older buildings suffered more damage than newer buildings. And part of that's the building codes. One of the things the building code requires is that they, again, be designed to meet a certain wind load. And there are certain parts of the structure that are inspected to make sure that those are done. Because when a few things fail, the whole building falls apart. Number one is the roof. Once the roof blows off, the walls lose stability and the structure can fall apart. And so inspecting to make sure that the roofs have these, they call them hurricane clips and tie downs and things like that to make sure that those are in place, that helps prevent that from happening. Another one I learned about is, I don't think we require it, but another point of failure is garage doors. It's a good idea to have a reinforced garage door if you're going to have a garage door that's the garage is attached to your house. Because garage doors, once they get blowed in, that becomes the wind goes in there and blows off the roof or the wall in the back, and that becomes a place for damage to happen to the house. And then the other point of contact is the foundation, where making sure that you actually are properly connecting to the foundation of the house, because if a house gets moved off the foundation even just a slight bit, if that connection breaks, the whole house has to be torn down and start over. Famously, during the tornado in Joplin, the F5 tornado, the hospital suffered a direct hit by the F5 tornado, and it blew out the windows and did a lot of damage. But the foundation of that hospital, a 5-story building, the tornado actually moved it off its foundation just a little bit. The whole thing had to be torn down and rebuilt. And then there's the property maintenance codes. That's something that we do ongoing. So that has to do with, say, the derelict buildings, the abandoned building registry, getting rid of these things that are falling apart and making sure that people are taking care of buildings properly. These are things that help to make sure that these aren't things that would be damaged during a disaster. And general cleanup of property is the less debris there is in people's yards, the less debris that will be blown to other properties and cause damage. Even our subdivision regulations, and it kind of ties into the fire code. When we come in to review subdivisions, one of the things we talk a lot about is how many houses there are on a dead-end road. And you may remember me talking about, when we're doing the code update, me harping a lot about cul-de-sacs and when they're appropriate and when they're not appropriate and things like that. When you have a storm like this, it becomes a bit more obvious why that's important, because when a storm comes through and your one point of access to an area is covered up by trees, nobody can get to you. And so having a grid system or having multiple ways to get in and out provides the resiliency to be able to respond during a disaster. Comprehensive planning, that's something that our department definitely does, and that has to do with where you place things and trying to do mitigation for disasters before they happen. And also there's floodplain development regulations. Now obviously that doesn't tie in with the tornado specifically, but it's related to disasters in general. There are floodplain development regulations. The whole idea is to, develop safely in a way that where if you have a flood, it won't cause as much damage. And then the final stage is preparedness. Our department doesn't have a whole lot to do with that. The preparedness is more like the fire department drilling, making sure they know what to do when there is a disaster, and having the necessary equipment to be able to respond to it. But our department does have a role in the preparation of the hazard mitigation plan. And the hazard mitigation plans is kind of putting everything in writing of what you do to mitigate and plan for what to do if there is a disaster. And those are required of any community in order to be able to have access to hazard mitigation grants. And so we are a part of that. Anyway, that's what I have. I just wanted to, let you know what our role is in all this. You have any questions for me?
Any questions? Tom, was it for sure there was just one tornado went through town? There wasn't several little bitty ones someplace?
I don't know.
Because it,
Yeah.
well, I thought the
damage.
I
I mean, the
thought
damage
the
is
Weather
confusing in
Service
places.
kept track of that type of thing.
Oh, I mean, they haven't. I have never heard anything like that. But I will say the damage is confusing in some places for sure.
Yeah, that's
There might have been
what
microbursts and things like that sort of. Yeah.
That's what I saw. It was, that one pattern you showed going through there, and then there was
Yeah.
several other little pockets.
Some of that, it's also the luck of the draw. Some buildings are on top of hills and some are in valleys, and even straight line winds can cause a lot of damage if you're exposed.
Okay.
I know some storm chasers reported too,
Well, that's kind of what I thought, but whatever.
right next to each other. That's what they were reporting.
Thanks, Tom.
Any other comments, questions for Tom on this issue?
Tom, is there anything you've gone through this process after a tornado you think you can do better, or we need to do with codes, or anything like that?
Well, one thing that isn't discussed enough is storm shelters. I mean, in Rolla, I've never heard anybody talk about wanting to do any sort of program or even encouraging people to put in storm shelters. With the code rewrite, we did add something to the code that basically requires if you do a mobile home park, manufactured home park, or an RV park, it requires you to install community storm shelters so that those people have a place to go. We haven't had anybody come in and do that yet, but there may be a need to sort of at least discuss something like that because it hasn't been discussed in the past. And another thing that's kind of been found is, the fire department drills on what to do when there's a disaster. They pretty well know what they're doing, but the rest of the city, like wasn't anything like written and in place for what do you do if you're not the fire department, and whatnot. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I saw and I heard, I don't know how many comments on how the town came together for days. I mean, days. Picking up trash, the high school, when they didn't have high school, the kids came in and then they went around. Sunday, the churches let out and the congregations went out and helped. And it was just, in every neighborhood, just, it didn't matter the economic level, the community just came together. It was amazing. And the public services, they helped, but a huge amount of just citizens concerned that came out and helped. And I heard people from other communities that came through and witnessed that, and they commented. They couldn't believe how many citizens were out there doing their thing. So, have to
Tom,
give
do you-
everybody
Do
credit.
you have the number of hours that we're reporting to FEMA,
I do not.
volunteer hours?
No.
It was, at one time, they said 20,000 individuals. And so 20,000 people times so many hours, I think it would be a pretty phenomenal thing. But that's part of the FEMA process, is that you have to report your volunteers and volunteer hours, so.
But it wasn't just the people out doing the work. There were people bringing food, donating, businesses.
Right.
Yeah,
Every business I can think of was donating food.
yeah.
I don't think it'd be hyperbolic to say that every able-bodied person in Rolla did something.
Yeah. Any other comments? I think we've wore out tonight, so meeting's adjourned.
Well, it wasn't long.